Space trash is becoming more and more of a problem as we are launching more and deorbiting more, and it is going to cost governments money. Specifically, I'm talking about the US government here, NASA. A story came out today by Eric Berger of Ars Technica. I talked about this before. I will link it above so you can watch it after. It is a piece of the International Space Station, a battery pallet that was predicted to completely burn up in Earth's atmosphere when it was dumped from the International Space Station years ago, but it survived. At least part of it survived. And this battery pallet, part of it came crashing down into a house in Naples, Florida, where it did not hit anybody, but there was a 19-year-old person home, and the damage that could have been done to loss of life is significant. And this is not a new story. It is more reoccurring. We're seeing this happen more and more, whether it's a spent rocket booster, specifically China tends to drop spent rocket boosters, or whether it's a piece of the International Space Station or part of the Dragon that was predicted to burn up in the atmosphere, but some of it did not burn up and made it back down to Earth. And I am completely for launching more and more and more stuff into space, but we need to do it responsibly. If we're launching more stuff into space, we do need to deorbit it. And so about a year ago, the Federal Communications Commission in the United States changed the rules so that instead of having a 20-year guideline, which means that after your satellite is done with its lifetime, you have 20 years to deorbit it. Now they've changed to 5. So any U.S. company, U.S. organization, or anybody doing business in the United States, they have to follow this FCC rule, where now, after your satellite is done, it needs to be deorbited within 5 years. And there are a lot of organizations that are being proactive about this, SpaceX being one of them. They are launching more and more Starlinks, and they are proactively deorbiting the Starlinks. But our models are not perfect when it comes to what's going to burn up in the atmosphere. And then we also have the chemicals that are being released into the atmosphere, which I talked about in the previous video. So we have issues here where the U.S. government is being held accountable to the damages done to this house in Naples, and not just the damages. So it is in excess of $80,000 for non-insured property damage loss, business interruption damages, emotional and mental anguish damages, and the cost for assistance from third parties. Because you can imagine they probably had to verify this through many parties, not just NASA. They had to probably get lawyers. I don't know. I defer to the lawyers because I'm not one, but I don't know about the emotional, mental anguish, all of that stuff. But $80,000 is what this battery pellet that did not burn up is probably going to cost to NASA. Now, it is not a lawsuit. It is a claim that this family is filing to NASA, to the US government, saying that we want $80,000 from you for this battery pellet that you released from the International Space Station that fell on our house. If it had been another country, if this had been another country's fault, or if this NASA incident had landed in somebody else's country, it would have been held by international treaty, the Space Liability Convention. But because this is all domestic here, NASA's a U.S. entity, it is being claimed through the Federal Torts Claim Act. And again, I am not a lawyer, so please listen to the lawyers when they talk about what all this means. I'm just telling you from what I've picked up with space law, this is pretty much an open and shut case as far as I know. Like, there's no doubt NASA has admitted that this is their battery pellet. The U.S. government is liable for damages done by space trash from U.S. activity. Anything that is launched to space that is by a certain country or by a company of that country. So SpaceX, for example, is a U.S. company, and therefore the U.S. government is liable for NASA, a government agency, but also for the companies that operate in the United States. It gets more complex than that if you're talking about multiple countries. I know Japan was involved. I think it was a Japanese battery pellet that NASA used. I assume that because Japan wasn't the one that released it, that they're not liable. But again, talk to the lawyers. I defer to lawyers because I think it gets really complex when you get into international space law. This news came just a day after news from yesterday, where a reporter from WLOS News 13 in Asheville, North Carolina, reported that it was confirmed that a Dragon trunk from a recent mission to the International Space Station deorbited and landed in North Carolina. And there have been other claims. There was a SpaceX Dragon trunk that survived reentry and landed in Saskatchewan, Canada, for example. I don't think damage was done in either of these cases, but we're seeing, again, not just NASA, but a US company, SpaceX, and SpaceX, not to single them out. There have been other companies out there that have had issues like this where, we're just seeing these models that we use to predict what's going to completely burn up in the atmosphere. These models are not perfect. And we probably need to be erring on the side of caution and being much more conservative about what it is that we decide will burn up safely. Now, what do we do with space trash that we want to burn up, but might not survive or might not fully burn up in the atmosphere? Some of it might survive. Well, we usually put that over the Pacific Ocean. There's a point that is like farthest from any habitable land in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and that is where we tend to put big satellites. That's where they're going to put the International Space Station, which I'm really sad about. But like, that is where we safely deorbit things, which is probably not best for the ocean. So I talk about all this, about the environmentalism with the ocean and with the atmosphere in the previous video I did. But we do need to think about this. If we are going to be deorbiting our stuff that we launch up there, which is the very safe thing to do, it is the responsible thing to do. We need to be responsible stewards of the orbital environment, but we also need to make sure that we are being responsible to the people and the life and the property on the ground. Otherwise, you're going to see more and more countries needing to pay up. Now, whether or not other countries, aside from the United States, pay up is a big question. I think only one other case in the history of the space age where one country paid another country for liability damages, and I can't remember the details of it. I will look up the details and put it in the description. But basically, this is sort of unprecedented territory where we just don't know what's going to happen with the space junk that is falling to Earth that is only going to increase because we are launching more and therefore deorbiting more. It is a good thing that we are deorbiting more, but at the same time, I think that we need to be thinking more about recycling what's in space, reusing what's in space. And if you agree with me or you're curious to know what the trade-offs are with deorbiting versus keeping things up there versus recycling or repurposing, reusing, go ahead and watch this video next.